Mandela said, if you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. If you talk to him in his language, that goes to his heart. My name's Karl Johnson. I'm the managing director of Accelerate in the US. We're a digital customer experience agency that works primarily with travel and hospitality. The reason I start with this quote is because I like to read this in both a metaphorical sense as well as a literal sense. If you think about it in a very literal way, relevant content that you deliver to your passengers and your customers, it speaks to their head in sort of a practical manner. When you translate that content into a native tongue, you're able to actually speak to their heart, even if they're English as a second language speaker or they speak another language which you're serving content in. But if you think of this quote in a more metaphorical sense, you can take this even to a further level. Personalized, relevant, translated content not only speaks to the head and the heart, but also speaks to the soul. And I mean this on the level that you're making the deepest possible connection to your passengers, your customers. You're speaking to them on an emotional level, not just a practical one, not just one that they understand in their native tongue so they truly understand the meaning, but you're actually connecting with them on an emotional level. This is the setup for what we're going to talk about today. Glocal personalization, both how it's implemented today and how it will be implemented tomorrow, and how the thought leaders of today are already tackling it. Translation, localization, and personalization, all three are required to achieve what we coin glocal personalization. And of course, glocal here in quotes, because going global and going local, you can't do one without the other anymore. You have to do both simultaneously. But doing both at the same time requires a bit of a different mix. It's all about increasing relevancy while retaining authenticity. That's what all of this is about. That's what personalization, translation, localization, that's what all of this is about. You can't do one without the other, because if you do, you will have failed. It doesn't matter how relevant you become in the content or experiences that you serve up to your audiences. If you do it in an inauthentic manner, it's not effective. And if you think of this in a very personal sense, take digital out of the equation. If I sit down at a bar and I meet you for 15 minutes and we have a chat, and you're just telling me everything you think I want to hear and you come across in a very cheesy manner, I might say, bye, nice to meet you, and leave, but then not have very good thoughts about you and not want to be your friend, and really not like you because you were very inauthentic in your interactions with me. The exact same thing happens when your customers interact with your brand. So looking at glocal personalization, the best case study that I can go through with you today is Turkish Airlines. So Turkish Airlines is a client of ours we've been working with for a few years now. And everybody's familiar with Turkish Airlines' brand. But there's one aspect of Turkish Airlines which makes them the most perfect yet complex use case for what we're talking about today. And that's this statistic right here. Turkish flies to more airlines than any other global airline, 120 countries. Those 120 countries include a lot of languages, markets, cultures, ethnicities, everything you can imagine, right? The complexity of the overall customer base and how you serve personalized experiences to them is incredible. So the need of Turkish Airlines when we started working together is one that you've all heard before. We need to go global, but we need to go locally at the same time as well, and we need to do that in a personalized manner. And by the way, we need to do more quickly, more effectively, and more efficiently as well. But what makes it even more exponentially complex is the scale of that. 250 plus websites, probably well beyond that now. 120 countries, so each country having its own localized site experience, and up to 30 different languages. So all the different content across all of those sites, country sites, product sites, and languages, all the combinations are all translated across up to 30 different languages. That makes it a very complex solution. But the way to tackle this today is essentially at a very, very simplistic high level, is with a really tightly integrated content stack. And hopefully that term makes sense to those in the room who have a marketing background. But enterprise content management alone won't, of course, solve the problem. Translation management alone won't solve the problem, and personalization won't. But when the three are all fully integrated in a tightly integrated stack in a native manner, all three come together. The workflow between all three is done in a very native, tightly integrated way as well. You're able to actually solve this problem and scale out to support many more countries and languages as you go. So the results, again, at a high level include a pretty dramatic increase in traffic and conversions. Of course, a 20% increase in conversions across the board is nothing to sneeze at, and that can absolutely move the needle on both the bottom and top line as well. But one thing that's really interesting here is not just because personalization, of course, helps a lot with conversions, but it doesn't necessarily help with traffic. One thing you'll notice here is that when we combine our approach to translation management and personalization in one, we get some pretty dramatic, up to almost 200% increases in traffic from some really key growth markets for us. A major, major reason is because even if there are a lot of English as a second language speakers in these markets, even if they can consume your content in English and understand it, if they consume it in their native tongue and you've put in the effort to tightly translate everything that you're doing, the growth is pretty dramatic as well. So this requires all three pieces that are in this solution here. Data-driven personalization, of course, is a massive aspect of this as well. So I imagine most of you have some approach to personalization at your airlines today. Some of you are leaders, some of you are laggers. Everyone has taken some aspect of personalization into account. This is a pretty great example of what personalization of today looks like when done pretty well, and starts with a strategy that focuses on a number of different personas that represent different segments of your flyers based on their patterns and things like that, spend and travel history. Utilizing explicit and implicit data. In this case, for those who aren't familiar with those terms, explicit being data that users sort of or customers volunteer to you, typically preferences. Implicit data being data that you're collecting about their behaviors without them necessarily being aware of each data point being collected. Over 75 different data points are being used in the personalization engine. So every time that we target a piece of content or select an image or an asset or choose to show this or not show that, utilizing over 75 different data points about each customer. And that's sort of growing all the time, and that's something you have to be flexible with. And of course, all of this personalized content is available across all of the languages we mentioned. So in this case, up to 30 different languages. So it's personalized, but it's also being personalized in their native tongue. So that's today, and that's a great example of what a leading airline is able to do today. But what we're all here to talk about is tomorrow. And a big concept that we're introducing here is the utilization and leveraging of AI to deliver what we call real-time content. So the future of content is real-time translation, real-time localization, personalization, and even taking it a step further, generation. Now, I don't know how many people are familiar with the concept of content or experience generation, but essentially what we're talking about here is when a machine, an AI or a machine learning model, is able to actually generate part of an experience you're delivering to your customer without manual intervention, or with very, very little upfront manual intervention. We define real-time content. It's a term that I like to use a lot. That we define it as content that is crafted or created instantly to serve a specific purpose for a specific person at a specific moment in time. In order to really achieve the definition that we use here, all three of those pieces have to come together. Right? It's not just content that you're serving up to me because you know me. It's content you're serving to me in this exact moment, for this exact touch point, and this exact journey. It's fully contextual in that case. So a look today, a flashback to today. Personalization is primarily driven by personas. Primarily driven by personas and a set of rules or logic. On this side, we have image A. Maybe we have 3 different hero banners we can display. We have a number of greetings, maybe some target location information, some ancillary products we're going to feature. We feed that into a personalization engine where we tag someone to the most likely persona or segment or subsegment they align with. And then at the end, we spit out what I call best fit content. This probably represents somewhat like what a lot of you are doing today. And it can be a very sophisticated and relatively accurate way of doing personalization, so there's certainly nothing wrong with it. But when we take it to the next level and we apply things like machine learning and artificial intelligence to it, we get a little bit of a different approach. So instead of having a set of pre-authored selected items of content, we're feeding into our big data pool or data lake here of a set of content ideas, goals, themes, things we're trying to accomplish with bits of content, a number of different disparate data sources, both owned data and third-party data, data on that user, data on similar users, And a big one here we're going to feature in a second is what I call enrichment APIs. Basically outside data that helps us understand and target these customers better, but it's not data that we necessarily own, but we can get access to. That all gets fed into the machine here, and in this case, we have models that are trained on understanding what type of outcomes we're targeting. Those models are taking all of our content ideas and information, all of the data, third-party and owned data, feeding it in there, and helping spit out in real time while it's requested by the customer or the user. It's then spitting out the content that we think, based on our learnings here, will be the most relevant content possible for that particular moment. The big key here and why we use something like machine learning is because we're collecting pretty advanced analytics all along the way on how relevant that content was, how it was received, how interactive the customer was with it. We feed that back into the machine, and it's continually improving itself. So the next time it serves up content, could be 2 seconds from now, it should be even more accurate and even more relevant because we're learning as we go. So persona-based personalization today, we still have a lot of data we can use even today. Even when you don't even consider AI and machine learning, you take that out of the equation. When you're looking at your prospects, you know something about everyone. I have a lot of people that come up to me after conferences and say, but it's all great for an authenticated user. We know a lot about them, but how about everybody else? We can't personalize anything for them. Well, you know something about everybody, so use it, right? So even starting here, a fully unknown customer going through to a known, there's always data sources and data points and characteristics you know about that user that you can use. When you go more into the customer, so in this sense, you can think of this going from known to connected as maybe they're authenticated and they've logged into their account on your website or your app. There's, of course, a lot more characteristics you can use, and you can get more and more sophisticated as you go with your approach. But when we look at the real-time personalization case, when we're both using AI to generate the content, but we're also leveraging other people's AI or machine learning APIs that help us enrich our content or our intelligence on the customer, we start to get a lot more information. And this primarily applies once the person's known. We start to be able to gather things like the personality, the tone, the level of formality in conversations, where they are in their life, what are their goals, motivations, something we like to call mind state, purchase readiness, all these sort of great terms that are just different ways of looking at how someone thinks and how they might want to be spoken to or converse, how you can make content resonate even better with them and grab them at the right time in their journey. As you get more and more advanced, you bring in a lot of the more social listening, especially if it's attributable to that particular customer. We're doing topic modeling on their conversations or broader conversations of people like them to help us represent what type of things are hot and topical to them right now. We're grabbing advanced analytics on their journey and feeding that in as well. So there's a lot of information here that when you start to pull in aspects of AI that allow you to really, truly deliver contextual content and experiences that are very contextual to a specific moment in that journey for that specific customer. One example, as I mentioned before, the enrichment APIs. One great example, this is IBM Watson output. So it's an IBM Watson Personality Insights API. So consider it a third-party data source that we're able to call in real time. And this did an analysis on my public Twitter feed. And what this is giving me is somewhere around 60 to 70 different data points on how it analyzed my personality as a social persona, essentially, on everything from how ambitious am I, how agreeable am I, how egotistical am I, maybe, what type of attitude might I have, right? How I sort of respond when I'm spoken to on social media. All these different characteristics represent my personality quantitatively, if you will. You can also take that exact same analysis and run it on your brand's content, because your brand is a person, so to speak, and has a personality. And if you run that exact same analysis on your brand's content, you can start to see differences between how you talk about yourself and how the customer you're targeting likes to be talked to. And this becomes one of many data sources that help feed into your real-time personalization engine, so you're now targeting content and experiences in the most relevant way possible to that particular customer. When you go beyond personalization, utilizing AI, you get into pure, what we call generation. You're creating content almost from scratch without a human pre-authoring that content. It's being fed a lot of data about that content, but no human sat down and actually typed up that content. There are a couple different use cases for doing content generation in real time. We're really going to focus on what I call micro content. So small, quickly consumable moments that have high impact on the overall experience are able to manipulate a customer's journey. It might be as simple as a call to action label. It might be text in an email. It might be product descriptions, ancillary product descriptions, which we'll show you an example of in a second. But it's small pieces of content that really have high impact on impacting that customer's journey. When it's virtually impossible to pre-author a piece of content for this, that can be changed in real time and templated, like you can change out this word or that word, to make it personalizable enough to actually achieve that content's goal, which in most cases might be conversion, add to cart, buy, whatever it might be. You can actually generate it in real time so that piece of content is completely custom written for that particular person in that particular moment. And that's where we'll show an example here. So, last time I booked a flight to a conference I was going to in Las Vegas a couple months ago, I went and checked out the hotel description. And this is sourced from Expedia. So the hotel description on Expedia, where I was looking to stay, looks just like this. There's millions of these. We all see them every day. This description about this hotel, when I wanted to add a hotel to my flight booking, is completely generic, right? Every single person in this room would see this exact same description, regardless of who they are and the purpose of their trip and when they're going, anything else, right? I'm going on a business trip. I fly on this airline for my business all the time, several times a month sometimes. My habits are the exact same. I never rent a car when I go on a business trip, especially if it's within an hour of the airport. This place is 15 minutes or so. And yet there's 6 different items in here telling me about parking. Not relevant at all to me. You could exclude all of that. I don't know anything about this location. This map adds no value to me. I don't know where Volunteer Boulevard is. This is not where I live. Most of this information is not relevant to me for this trip at all. When you apply the concept of real-time content, you start to get a hotel description that's more something like this. This is a hotel description that's generated instantly in real time for me, but also for this specific moment in time. It's in the context of my specific itinerary. It's in the context of my flying and traveling behaviors. It's in the context of my preferences. Everything from, it knows the most important thing to me when I'm traveling on business and staying in a hotel is connectivity, right? Because I'm doing conference calls, I'm doing meetings, obviously I'm doing email presentations, et cetera. It's pulling in stuff from review sites. It's telling me the Wi-Fi is not only great, it has Wi-Fi, great, everybody has Wi-Fi. It's actually super fast. I can get 100 meg down connection, and it's rated 5 stars. It has plenty of plugs. It has the steakhouse I love to take my clients out to on site. And this piece of information here, it means it's fully contextual to my itinerary. It's telling me that I can stay at this hotel right up until the point I need to get to the airport to take my flight home because it has a late checkout. This is a pretty basic example, but this is showing how you can fully contextualize content and personalize content when you generate it real time for that specific moment in someone's journey. So I want to challenge you today to rethink content. Rethink what it means, how it's delivered, how it's created, how it's represented. A really important example of that is conversational content, which is the third case I want to explain today about how you can pull in the power of AI and machine learning to power content creation for your brands. Conversational content, in its most basic form, is something we all use almost every day now, which is between Siri and Alexa and things like that. You throw in chatbot experiences or Facebook Messenger chats, which a lot of airlines have done a decent job at today. These types of experiences have a major difference, though. You're moving beyond a predefined experience. The customer is now getting content from you when they want it, how they want it, where they want it, in the order they want it, not in the order you want to serve it, right? So with conversational experiences, the content itself becomes the entire experience. And a quick example, if I ask Alexa to tell me about my upcoming trip with your airline, I might get 2 or 3 sentences back. That 2 or 3 sentences of content is the entire experience I had with that touch point with your brand. There's no visuals, there's no imagery, there's no video, there's no style or brand guideline that I got to consume to remind me of your brand, to make that emotional connection. Content itself is the entire experience when you go into a conversational experience mode. So that makes the content you're serving far more important than the content you're serving today. That's why generating that content in real time to be the most relevant and concise content possible that gets the job done is even more important when you're talking about conversational content. So I'll wrap this up with 3 keys to success for how you actually implement real-time content strategies and content development using AI. They apply to almost anything you do. Strategy first. Do not start with the hot tech. I think the technology behind this is fantastic. I'm an engineer by background. I get really excited by the tech behind this. But don't look at the tech first. Don't do it just because the tech is cool. Figure out the strategy first. How's your personalization strategy actually going to be fulfilled by the technology that's out there today? Adapt your personalization strategy to pull in some of these real-time concepts, but do strategy first. Go bite-sized, right? So if you have 250 websites across 120 countries, 30 languages, et cetera, don't sit down and say, OK, we need to personalize everything. How do we do this? Especially if you're looking at using something like real-time content, find one specific area, a micro-content like the example I showed before, ancillary product descriptions, that you can take, you can measure, and you can see how the ROI is justified for investing in that specific area if you hyper-personalize, hyper-contextualize that specific area. So choose bite-sized areas, measure and repeat. And that brings us into the third, of course, which is always be measuring and improving. So if you do bite-sized areas, which adhere to the strategy you've implemented here, you're constantly measuring and improving. And that improvement with AI can be automated and manual, right? And when I say automated, you're measuring how well people are responding to those pieces of hyper-personalized content. Those analytics are automatically fed back in and constantly improving itself. But there's, of course, also higher-level analytics that you're going to want to be monitoring to make sure that this is actually justifying the continued investment you're making into it and whether you want to keep expanding it across your experiences.